when I say smaller committees, they're not quite at the PLC level. Uh, what we do with them, though, and this is what my plan is, for the teacher teams, is to actually make them PLCs, in the sense that not only are they talking about students, but now they're going to talk about content as well. Now, when you put 5 teachers on a team together, the first thing that they're going to need is a little bit of training to figure out how to work together, because it's putting them together and saying, okay, have at it, is probably the worst idea that anybody can come up with. So part of what we're going to do this year is provide them with some training to what a PLC actually is, what they can do inside of that PLC. When I was at Chartiers Valley around Pittsburgh, we did form a PLC centered around formative assessment. And what we were able to find was the power of the learning by the teachers was so incredible. And as the leader of it, I was forced to step aside from any kind of leadership expectation that I had and became a student with the teachers.
So welcome back everyone on Tomo Club podcast series. I'm Avinash, co-founder at Tomo Club. And today we have the principal of Connellsville area middle school, Robbie. And the topic of discussion is going to be about data with a heart. So how can we use evidence to empower teachers and students? I think it's a very well thought out topic of how we're going to have the emotional intelligence and data intelligence, especially in the age of AI. So thank you so much for taking out time today, Robbie, for us, and happy to have you here.
I'm very excited to be here. Any chance I have to actually talk about the things that we do on a daily basis is never a bad day. So I'm excited to be here too.
No, absolutely. I think all the school leaders, principals, superintendents that I've met, they have this inert passion for education, and that's why they love to speak their heart out. And that's one of the major value that we have seen when we should put out these podcast recordings on social media. So before we get started, Robbie, I would love to know what got you into education in the first place, and the reason that you are here, is it still valid after so many years?
Absolutely. I was a high school All-American football player. I was a place kicker and a running back, and I went to college at Kent State as a kicker, thinking that my next stop would be the NFL. And I had a couple of opportunities to get there before an injury ended my career. So plan B was to finish and get my degree, which I got in political science. And I came back I'm originally from Connellsville, so I came back to Connellsville and started working on some political campaigns and realized that the 35-hour days on election day were not conducive to having the kind of family life that I wanted. So I started to think about what I might be good at, and football was my golden ticket. So I thought, well, I could probably be a football coach, and started coaching football and thought, well, most coaches are teachers, so teaching's not a bad gig. So let's go forward and get my teaching certification and be a football coach that teaches on the side. So as I was going through my studies, the class that I had was educational psychology. And being in that class kind of really started to turn the dial from coach over to teacher, because I started to learn about how the brain works, about how adolescents learn. And before I knew it, I started to develop this passion, not only just for coaching now, but also for what I can do for students. And I got my certification, found believe it or not, a coaching job that was also an opportunity to do a lot of substitute teaching in the Pittsburgh area. After 2 years of subbing and coaching, I was immediately hired, and I taught 8th grade civics for 5 years. And my degree being political science, it was perfect. It was right up my alley. I was teaching civics, coaching football, and life was phenomenal. 5 years into my teaching career, I started to get a little bit antsy. When I say that, I mean, it was almost to a point where I was bored. I was still teaching, still coaching, but I wanted more. I wanted to be a teacher of teachers. So a position opened up at the high school. It was called administrative practitioner. It's a glorified dean of students position where I did a lot of discipline. but also was able to get my principal certification while I was working. So I was practicing the things I was learning. And before I knew it, football was a second thought. I gave up coaching and threw all of my attention into my studies as to be a principal. Became certified and was immediately then promoted to assistant principal at the high school, where I spent the next 17 years of my career as an assistant principal. I left Chartiers Valley and moved, I want to say maybe 10 minutes down the road to a district called South Fayette. That is a very high achieving district. So much so that the pressures that are put on some of the students was almost too much. I was there for 4 years, and realizing the pressure that was put on the students was also put on the administrators, and realized that my health was a little bit more important than what I was trying to do in the building. So, position of middle school principal opened up back at Connellsville, where it all began, and I was hired. Actually, my old baseball coach was one of the men on the guys on the school board that actually worked to get me in. So I was hired and began working last year. Last June was my first year. This is my second year now. And it's interesting how my life has come full circle, where I'm now back where I first started and helping those who maybe needed a little bit more than those up here in Pittsburgh.
Incredible. Honestly, I think that's a very organic story where things happened with the flow. And I guess you have been very open to the opportunities to come till here. So congratulations on that. And so coming back to the topic today, so I was reading about you, and you have this leadership philosophy, right? Of often described as data with a heart. So what does this
Mhm.
phrase mean to you in real school life, especially when the numbers don't tell the whole story?
Absolutely. And with my experience being what it is, coming from a suburban district that is high performing, where you look at data on individual students. And it's kind of contrasting going from South Fayette to Connellsville, because even though South Fayette was very high achieving, we still looked at how students' data appeared. And when we did that, we looked at their achievement data first. And it was always achievement data first at South Fayette, because that's what our students and their parents wanted, was how are they achieving. And if there was any kind of, I want to say, a glitch in the armor, that set up a red flag. And because of that, that's when we had to bring parents in. They wanted to know everything, down to the minutes that students were out of the classroom. So I can remember one specific meeting that we had. A student was a 4.0 student on a 4.0 scale, was probably going to be the valedictorian. And the parents wanted to know why they were missing part of their, I think it was their art class, because that was where they would go to get their little break for the day. The brain break was in their art class. The student didn't want to go to art. They wanted to go to more of an advanced biology class that didn't fit into their schedule. So they were skipping art to go to this advanced biology class.
Mm.
And when I told them that I had to give them a Saturday detention, the parents were furious. They're trying to better themselves. And I said, but they're not where they're supposed to be. So we had a little bit of an argument over that. And what it came down to was, at South Fayette, the drive for academics was so strong because all of the other needs were met. Uh, the Maslow's needs were met. They had a place to sleep. They had food in their stomach. They had clothes on their back. Now, switching gears and going to Connellsville, where uh, the socioeconomic background is very low, where we have about 56% of our students receive free and reduced lunches. Now our shift is, obviously we're still concerned about the academics, but now we have to start to look at Maslow and think about the needs that aren't getting met. Like,
Yeah.
when was the last meal? What was it? I mean, was it anything that was anything nutritious? And what we do is we start to look at academics, attendance, behavior, but now also we throw in that fourth caveat of the socioeconomic background. Is this a student who is, because of the government shutdown, not eating because their EBT is not filled up? When was the last meal that they had? When was the last new pair of shoes that they got? And we start to look at all these things and we develop a profile. And in the process of developing this profile, what we'll do then is if the student's academics are low, we start to look at the reasons why. Is the attendance very high? And if it's not high, why are the academics now still low?
Yeah.
So the other part of that is the socioeconomic background. And when you meet these children, and I'm going to call them children because sometimes the guidance at home is not what it needs to be. When you start to talk to them and you realize that they are coming to school, the reason why they're coming to school is that's the most positive 8 hours of their day that they're going to have.
Right.
So the data can tell them one thing. Their grades are poor because, well, maybe they really don't know how to read that well yet.
Hmm.
Uh, but the reason why they don't know how to read is because they haven't had a good meal in 3 days. So we try and take all of that into account and put it into a data profile that shows us more than just numbers, but also where the student is coming from.
That's really disheartening to know that, that even now we have so many of those cases where the root cause of a problem is not even in showing up in the numbers until you look at
Exactly.
the person is not a data, the person is actually a person. So thank you so much for having that empathy, to understand that. And but so what have been your proactive measures, when you get to know about such kind of data, where students are hungry or they're not able to keep up well because of the bad home situation. So what are the usual action steps, or what's the protocol says?
Well, what we've done, and again, this being my second year back home in Connellsville, what the school has done is created this instrument called a carrying closet. In
Okay.
the carrying closet, we have clothes that have been donated. We have food that has been donated, and a lot of times, the teacher in charge of it, her name is Carol Kelly. She's phenomenal. Whenever we sit down and look at the data and we get these profiles, we will pick out those students that we think have the highest need, and then we'll create care packages for them. So every Friday, they have something to take home and they're going to have something to eat, whether that would be a couple of cans of soup or some other things that we can possibly give them so that they have something over the weekend to eat. So that was one thing that we've done. The other part that we've done too is in our cafeteria, because our students have such a high level of low socioeconomic background, every student receives a free lunch and they also receive a free breakfast.
Mhm.
So a lot of times, students, well, we'll have some leftover food, and instead of throwing it out, the cafeteria workers will package it, and we'll give it to some of those students we know need it. But again, we have to be able to develop that profile of the students who do need it, and that takes an astronomical amount of work. Going back to the elementaries and speaking to some of their teachers there, and then looking at where some of these students reside, and we've also done some home visits just to see what's going on at home as well. So
Okay.
we try and reach out as much as we can and extend what we have to as many as we can, but sometimes it's just not enough.
That's still something, definitely. And I always imagine that, how can you talk about innovation, or how can you talk about new programs like AI, when we are struggling with the basic needs? Um, so, but it's also about how do you create a system of support at the teacher's end as well, right? How
Hmm.
do you train them, or how do you sensitize them? Because don't take me wrong, teachers are already stretched too thin, right? So
Hmm.
sometimes empathy can become a thing of luxury. I sometimes say
Hmm.
that, right? Uh, when you are not in a good place yourself, it's very difficult to be empathetic. So,
Absolutely.
how do you do this in terms of your teacher training, and so that they also starts to show that very deliberately?
One of the things that we worked very hard on to lay the groundwork for this year was a multi-tiered systems of support. So what we decided to do was create a team where I am part of the team, but I don't run the team. Where we do look at all that data, and the big three obviously are academics, attendance, and behavior. And then we did add that fourth caveat in there of their socioeconomic background. But it's completely teacher driven, and we have a team that meets twice a month. Once one of their meetings is as a core group where they're looking at their specific piece of the information, whether that be attendance. We have an attendance team. And part of that attendance team is also a group that we call Check and Connect, where it provides students an opportunity. If they are struggling with attendance, they have somebody they can check in with regularly. And it's a teacher that they can connect with on a little bit more of a personal level.
Mm,
Excuse me. And then we have our academic team that creates that academic profile for all students. I mean, we have about 977 students in our building, so they create a profile for all of them. Maybe we have a student who, for whatever reason, has had A's in the past, but now they're looking at C's.
mm,
So that's a red flag, and we want to figure it out what's going on. And then the behavior side of things as well. And all teachers who are part of this did receive some training from the uh, Pennsylvania Area Training, Technical Training Network. It's called Patton, where we had a couple of wonderful trainers come in and work with our teachers on what to look for. Because a lot of times you can say, okay, we're just going to pick out those who are just doing poorly. But there's also another reason why. And they gave us some different things to look for in students as we would refer them to the different teams that we have.
So shifting some gears, I understand on the fact that when students are not doing well, the everything will take a backseat. But let's look at the other side of the metric where it's also the curriculum and the teaching practices that needs a constant revision, that needs a little bit more agility. So tell us what kind of data help you give you signal in that direction that there has to be some immediate changes required, whether in terms of content or in terms of curriculum or teacher training or teacher instructional training.
Absolutely. And then this is actually the topic of my dissertation in practice.
Okay.
So I have a lot of great information on this one.
Sure.
One of the things that we have at Connellsville Middle School is a 9-period day. Classes are 42 minutes, and we alternate A and B day. It's a great high school schedule, where if we were teaching high school students, it would be phenomenal. But because we have middle school students, one of the things that we're looking at is a possible shift in our schedule to be more middle school friendly, let's say.
Mm,
We want, when I say we, I mean, it would be myself, my assistant principal, and also a couple of teachers that we have on a teacher scheduling committee. We want to implement the full middle school concept completely.
mm,
And when I say middle school concept, it comes basically from the Association of Middle Level Learners, AMLE, came out with a position statement called This We Believe. And in this position statement, it lays out a lot of the things that are needed for the middle school concept. One of the things that they do talk about is curriculum. And in that curriculum, they talk a lot about having it be multidisciplinary in the sense that now you're going to have a set of teachers that are going to come together to form a team that are going to be able to plan these multidisciplinary units. And that's something that we haven't had in our school probably since 2018.
mm,
They had a block schedule where they did have teacher teams back then, I want to say from maybe 2015 to 2018. It was changed. A couple of school board members came in who were former teachers and said, look, this is what we need to do. We need to go to this 9-period alternating day. And since that time, we've seen achievement scores drop. So looking back at that time and considering what it was that could have been the big catalyst to this drop, there were a couple of things. The state system of assessment changed for middle school, but also the change back to a 42-minute period. Students had that less time to spend with high qualified teachers, but then the teachers also lost that planning time together.
mm,
So looking to implement that back into it. Now we're going to start to see the MTSS come down to the team level, where now it's very personalized, where these teachers are going to have maybe 100, 120 students total, where they can then look at each student individually a whole lot closer than we can as a team for the whole school. And I think what we're going to find is an increase in achievement almost immediately, because teachers are going to be able to start to build those relationships. As they build those relationships with those students, we're going to start to see an increase in attendance because kids are going to want to come to school. They're not going to want to disappoint their teacher. now that they have this positive experience that they're going to be working with in terms of a teacher team, I think what we'll see is an increase then in our academic background as well. And I think our achievement scores will actually start to go through the roof too. Because again, it comes down to these students who are adolescents that are still learning their way, that are trying to weave and duck and dive the things that life is throwing at them, are going to find that the support they have in their teachers is second to none. So that's going to be the big push as we start moving into next year. And well, with scheduling starting to come up, we're going to have to start to lay the groundwork for how we're going to do it. So that's one of the things that we're working towards right now is the new master schedule, which would, be a direct result of our poor achievement scores now.
No, because the achievement scores or attendance scores, they directly impact the funding also, right? Is that also a formula at your end?
It is, and that was a big push. A district initiative this year was a focus on attendance.
Hmm.
So that was, one of the things that we've been doing a lot with our MTSS team is that focus on attendance because we want to make sure that our kiddos are in school. If you're not in school, you're not going to have that opportunity for the positivity. And we've actually increased our attendance. I want to say by 80% already this year.
That's
So it's been
incredible.
very good. And it's district wide too. And I think the big push from our superintendent to really focus on it has really made a big deal difference.
Interesting. Also, sometimes, as a running an organization myself, I have seen that data sometimes intimidate people as well,
Mm.
because I can go on and say that how productive I was or how my day was stuffed with so many tasks. But when you look at the impact, it might be zero to nothing. So
Hmm.
the numbers can put a lot of perception whether you are moving the needle in the right direction. So I would love to know because you have worked in a like a high performing suburban district as well, and now a large rural middle school. So what's one insight that you have gained about building that teacher confidence so that they do not get intimidated by data, but they slowly start to embrace it? How does that shift happens?
It's interesting. This is the idea that all teachers know how to use data. All teachers use data. It's not true
Yeah.
because even at the high achieving district where I was, my first week on the job, it's actually a funny story. I was under the impression that hey, they're high performing. They must be very data literate. These teachers must be able to take their data and just dissect it
Yeah.
and so one of the English teachers came in and said, "Hey, I need you to send me a file of all the ninth graders and their past achievement scores." Absolutely, I'll be more than happy to because here I am, fresh on the job in a very high achieving district. I want to show that I can help. So I create this PDF. It was about 485 pages. It had all the data for all the ninth graders and sent it to the teacher. And within 20 minutes, I'm called over to the principal's office. And the principal was a good friend of mine. And she says, "What were you thinking?" I said, "What are you talking about? This is what she asked for." No, she didn't want 485 pages. She just wanted to be able to look and see past achievement.
Yeah.
And I said, "But she can just look through it by pressing, I know that and you know that, but she doesn't know how to use data."
Hmm.
I was shocked. So, okay, no problem. I simplify it for her. She gets back to it. She gets what she needs. She's happy. Everybody's happy except for me because now I realize that if she doesn't know how to use data, I'm going to have to teach her how.
Yeah.
So, over the course of my 4 years there, we took it piece by piece. And I said, okay, so you want to learn how to use data. This is what we're going to do. And I would meet with her, every couple of weeks and say, okay, so let's pull from their eighth grade year what their ELA scores were. And she pulled that. Okay, now let's start to drill down into this a little bit to see where they did well and where they didn't do well. We start to look at all this other little bit of data. She's like, "Oh wow, look, this student doesn't write very well. Oh, this student writes very well, but their reading comprehension isn't that good." Exactly. Now you're starting to build that picture of what it is that we're trying to do. So I said, "Okay, you have an assignment. Pick one class and make a profile for your students based upon these three things." Oh, that's easy, she said. And after she started to do that, you could just see the confidence it would build to a point where later on that year, she was coming to me saying, "Hey, did you look at this?"
Hmm.
And being the assistant principal, it's not just teacher evaluation, teacher observation, teacher walkthrough. It's also student discipline and student issues. So no, I haven't. Why don't let's plan a time where we can sit down and go through it. And she sent me an email that had a 300 and some page PDF on it, and it was just coming full circle like that. It was a proud moment because I knew that she then got it,
Hmm.
and then she can teach it to the other freshman English teachers as well. So that was the high achieving district. Coming down to Connellsville, that wasn't high achieving. It was interesting to see that the data push was already there. That the assistant to the superintendent, Tracy Coons, is a data guru.
Hmm.
She will say, "Show me the data that backs up why you want to do something."
Right.
Great. Okay. So she had been able to actually work with a lot of the teachers already. And whenever I would talk with the teachers, they would come in and have their data with them already and say, "Hey, this is what I'm looking at. What can we do to get these students better in this reading anchor?" And
Hmm.
it was refreshing to know that they already knew how to do that.
Hmm.
Uh, and then actually, whenever we started to really look at some of that, I said, "Well, where is this person socioeconomically?" "Well, I don't know." Okay, so then that's why we started to add that into it because it does paint that whole picture of what we look at with our students.
No, I think that's a huge shift of ideology and working style that you have brought in. Um, so on a regular basis, like as a principal, there are few metrics that you can keep a close watch on. So
Mhm.
since we're talking about data, I would love to know what are those key pointers that you always keep a tab on a weekly basis or a monthly basis.
The weekly basis is obviously attendance. That being the directive from the superintendent, I always look at the attendance. And I'll sit down. We have a truancy officer. I'll sit down with him weekly and say, "Okay, these are the students that we're going to focus on for this week. This one's missed the last 8 days of school. We need to do a home visit. Go out there and see what's going on." And I got to hand it to our he is phenomenal. He will go immediately. He will knock on doors. He will go to neighbors if nobody answers. But the attendance is obviously the big one that we look at. Uh, the second one that I look at quite consistently is the behavior. This is the first year we've had a dean of students. So the dean, the assistant principal, and myself will sit down with the guidance counselors and we'll go through that.
Hmm.
And we'll say, "Okay, well, this student's been suspended, and we need to have a meeting with them when they come back, just like a reentry meeting, so that they understand the expectation."
Hmm.
So we set those meetings up at the same time. We also then look at teacher assigned detentions, and one of the things that we did this year was to have teachers, if they're going to assign a detention, they got to make that phone call home.
Hmm.
Uh, a lot of them were nervous and scared because their feeling was, "Well, I'm going to call home and tell a parent I'm assigning a detention and they're going to yell at me."
Yeah.
And not if you do it from the start and tell them this is the expectation, this is what your student has been doing. And I said, "And if you would like to do it together, I'd be more than happy to." Um, our detentions have plummeted, not because and I can sit here and say that we have a better group of students, but I think it's because the teachers making those calls are starting to develop this proactive relationship with parents. Whereas they were afraid to do it. Now I have teachers who are making positive phone calls home, realizing the power that that has to build that partnership with parents. So those are the two big metrics we look at: are attendance and behavior. When we do have our MTSS meetings, that's when we get into the academics. I'll look at what that committee has put together and I'll start to go through it with a fine tooth comb to see if there's maybe students who have the same teacher. And if it's the same teacher, I'll go to the teacher and say, "What's going on here? You got a couple of kids that are struggling. Is it all the kids in the room? Is it just these two?" But then you have to have that tough conversation. And one of the things I've learned about coming back to Connellsville is those conversations aren't tough because the group of teachers really want to make sure that their students are performing well.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Also, specifically, I think if data can tell you what's happening, a relationship can tell you why. So basically,
Exactly.
the right track with that. Uh, but thankfully now, because of AI, data crunching can be just like talking to a sheet, and sheet will
Hmm.
talk back to you. So
Hmm.
have you guys incorporated anything around AI usage for understanding the data, or uploading an Excel sheet and talking to it back and forth so that the insights and the analysis can be easier? Have you guys done that?
We have not yet. And again, I say yet because I subscribe to a growth mindset. We are always trying to find ways to make our jobs easier. And I believe that is something that with a little bit of professional development, we can definitely make happen. Because I can tell you, my teachers are always asking, when can we get some AI professional development? And I keep telling them as soon as I can find something. So,
Oh, lovely, lovely. I'm glad you guys are open to it. I think that's the starting point of anything and everything. That the openness to keep on learning. So how can you be a lifelong learner is something very easy to say, very hard to do, and including anyone in the world, right? It's
mhm,
constant effort that you have to put in to be a lifelong learner, and it
mhm,
mostly comes
mhm.
from the leadership. Also, I would love to know about the professional learning communities. I was reading about it that you have, is it correct that you have introduced PLCs at your school?
Well, we have smaller. When I say smaller committees, they're not quite at the PLC level. Um, what we do with them, though, and this is what my plan is, excuse me, for the teacher teams, is to actually make them PLCs in the sense that not only are they talking about students, but now they're going to talk about content as well. Now, when you put 5 teachers on a team together, the first thing that they're going to need is a little bit of training to figure out how to work together, because it's putting them together and saying, okay, have at it, is probably the worst idea that
Mhm.
anybody can come up with. So part of what we're going to do this year is provide them with some training to what a PLC actually is, what they can do inside of that PLC. When I was at Chartiers Valley around Pittsburgh, we did form a PLC centered around formative assessment. And what we were able to find was the power of the learning by the teachers was so incredible. And as the leader of it, I was forced to step aside from any kind of leadership expectation that I had and became a student with the teachers. And that's one of the things that I've learned in incorporating PLCs is the leader aspect has to go away, because if you sit there and you dictate to the PLC what it is that you want them to do, it loses its organic touch. And
Yeah.
one of the things that comes out of a PLC has to be from the group. It can't be from one person saying, you do this, you do this, you do this.
Mm.
We're not leaders in that. We are all equals. And as equals, we're going to learn together and make it a positive experience.
Absolutely. I think that's the way to go. So I hope the PLC becomes more effective, more stronger at your school as well. Um, so now I'll try to picture up a little bit from 5 years from now. What does success look like? So from the data side as well as from the emotional side, how do you define the success of your school in coming years?
Looking at the data side first, I always like to, and I call data boring because sometimes it can be. Looking at the data side, I would love to see our attendance be 98% every day,
Mm.
which is not that far away. I think we can do that within 5 years. And in the process of making it 98%, want to be able to answer that question: why? Why are you now coming to school when before you weren't? And having focus groups with students, they can share that information candidly, which is also another part of uh, the level of comfort that they're going to have by coming to school. From an achievement standpoint, I think success would be, and this is not, we're like 40% proficient advanced right now. That's our highest level that we've seen probably in the last 4 or 5 years. I would love to see us at 75% proficient and advanced on the state assessments, which again, it's a stretch, yes, but I think it's definitely something we can do based upon how we get there would be having our teachers work together in teams where they are able to develop that home feeling, where we're now working with students not because we have to, but because we want to. And we're not going to say, well, I don't want this student on my team. We're going to have our teachers in a place where they say, give me the worst of the worst because I want to see them succeed. And I think that's a mindset that we can set up through our school, through our teachers. But that has to start with the leadership at the top. And my job is to be that example where we don't turn anyone away, where we're going to make sure that everybody is learning. And that's a belief statement that we all have to develop, that all students can learn. They're just going to learn differently. And
Right.
I think that's what, if we can get some AI incorporated in the next 5 years, we're going to be able to bridge those gaps quicker because we're going to be able to figure out why. And that's always the question is why?
Mm.
So that's what we look at.
Beautiful, lovely. So, we did cover up a lot of topics around data with the heart, and you gave us some very effective examples of how it has been able to come to life. Anything that we haven't covered around this topic that you would like to share more?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that as school leaders, as district leaders, that we need to remember is our staff. They're people too. And because they are sometimes, that mean email that we need to send out because, well, there are too many students in the hallway, can be taken care of just by being more present in the hallway and taking that step to make sure that our teachers understand what that expectation is without the mean email because they get enough. They get enough from the parents. Even though they may have taken that time to build that relationship with the families, sometimes a small term can make it negative. But at the same time, if we can show our teachers that we are supporting them as much as they're supporting our students, then we're going to find that they're taking care of their own mental health and their well being.
Right.
Because if they're not coming to school, then our students are missing out on the best possibilities and opportunities.
Right.
So, what I would love to leave the audience with is, as a leader, make sure you're taking care of those underneath you.
Great, great uh, message to that. Also, so at Tomo Club, in this podcast series, we have one section where we have a question inside, which has been passed on from one guest to the another. So there's a
Hmm.
previous guest I had who had a question for me to ask to you. Okay, so
Okay.
that's not directly related to this topic, but the question that a previous school leader wanted to know from another school leader is, uh, how are you solving, or how do you plan to solve for um, fidelity around AI so that there is reduced equity gaps in our graduates? Because students with AI understanding and without AI understanding, their equity gap is going to be huge. So how are you
Hmm.
planning, or how are you thinking about that problem statement?
Well, it's interesting that you ask because my business and computer teachers just went to a training at Carnegie Mellon
Mm,
that talks about AI and how can we integrate it into the classroom. And one of the ideas that they came back with was, why don't we create a class for sixth graders
mm,
that when they come into the middle school, they're being taught positive uses of AI. Now that brings in a lot of different other concepts like ethics that we're going to have to really look at as we build a class for sixth grade students. What ethics are we teaching
right.
in terms of what we want them to know? But I think what that would do then is they have it as sixth graders, then as seventh graders, we develop another course that maybe is more advanced, and as eighth graders, even more advanced. And when they go down to the high school, they're prepared to use it in a positive and ethical way.
Mm,
I think that would be our best bet. I think it would be our most productive way to make sure that we are trying to bridge that gap.
mm.
Uh, and again, it would have to start with our sixth grade and continuing to build upon something as we move forward.
So if I can summarize, you said you want to develop a course which is getting advanced year on year, so that by the
Mhm.
grade 12, it's able to produce those kids who have understanding around ethics of AI and the various nuances of AI, right?
Absolutely.
But how does that still ensure that the kids do not have equity gaps? So, for example, like there are some kids who are able to grasp the concept better, and there's some students who are still struggling. So, the equity gap, because let's say math or English or science, we have the same classroom. same content, same educator, yet there's a learning gap. And the learning
Hmm.
gap in AI can be more or less more effect more visible because it's just gonna be change the way they work. So
Hmm.
I think that's the question, that how do you ensure that same classroom will have different students, but still they end up at par.
Well, and I think, that brings me to a conversation I just had with one of my math teachers, uh, who came in very red faced, very angry, and said, "What do you want me to do with this?" And I said, "What is this?" And he said, "I have students using AI to solve problems."
Right.
And so, well, show me what you're looking at. And the teacher was able to plug in the problem, and AI spit out the steps to do the problem. And I said, "Isn't this what you taught?" "Well, I didn't teach it like this. I taught it a different way." And I said, "Okay, but they're not giving the answer here." So, thinking about how the student is getting the answer, they're working through the steps that are given to them through AI that you taught in a different way, but they're still getting the right answer. And his answer was yes, that's correct. And I said, "Well, the student brought this to you." "Yes." So
Mm.
they're already using AI without you knowing anyway, and
Right.
they're learning to get to the steps. They're getting the steps and they're getting the right answer. And his answer was yes. I said, "Why are we not happy with this?"
Mhm.
And at that point, he didn't know what to say. The student is learning, and it there are those students who get it visibly and by listening. There are those students who get it by figuring it out on their own. And I think with the help of AI, one of the things that we will start to see sooner rather than later is the closing of that achievement gap between those who get it very easily and those who have to work at it, because now they're going to be able to learn it the best way for them.
Hmm.
And I think that's important.
Nice. So I think allowing kids to use it their own way is also a way to ensure the equity gap doesn't exist. Banning will
Uh,
definitely increase equity gap.
yes, no, we definitely should not ban it.
Absolutely. So any question that you have that you would like to ask another school leader?
Yes. I think my question would center around um, what do you do with those students who, for whatever reason, beyond any possible intervention that you might put into place, still refuse to comply with reasonable requests?
Very good question. So I'll definitely get back to you when I have the answer for another school leader.
That, thank you.
But this has been very helpful, Robert. I think I learned a lot about how you managing data and how data first your entire ideology is. Thank you so much for taking out time, and it has been fantastic.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is, like I said, any chance I have to talk about the things that we do on a daily basis is always a great day. So thank you for this opportunity.
Perfect. Have a great day.